This hour of the Costa Report is brought to you by IBM. Big data at the speed of business.
Welcome to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and thank you for joining me for another 2 hours of straight talk radio. I want to welcome listeners tuning in on affiliate stations from Maine to Hawaii across all 50 states, and also welcome members of our armed forces who are joining us over the internet. Thank you for your many emails and letters and for making us part of your news week. In just a moment, conservative commentator, author, and talk show host Ben Shapiro will be joining us to discuss the growing political divide in America, which has become so extreme that protesters on many university campuses have attempted to prevent Shapiro from speaking there. Now, regardless of whether you agree with Shapiro or not, there's a reason that Shapiro hosts one of the most popular talk shows and podcasts in the country. He is well-informed, he's logical, and he articulates the conservative perspective in an efficient and rapid-fire way that very few can. And it is in the collective interest of both the left and the right of this country to hear what Shapiro has to say. And that is exactly what we're going to do in this next hour. We're going to open our ears and our minds, and we're going to listen like rational civil citizens who respect free speech. And if you can't do that, well, hey, you know what? It's real easy. Just turn the dial. Before Mr. Shapiro joins us, as is my custom each week, let me tell you a little about his background. Benjamin Aaron Shapiro was born in Los Angeles, California. He earned his undergraduate degree from UCLA and his law degree from Harvard University, after which he practiced at the law firm Goodwin Procter. At the young age of 17 years old, Shapiro became the youngest nationally syndicated columnist in the United States, and he published the first of a series of best-selling books. The book was titled Brainwashed: How Universities Indoctrinate America's Youth. In 2012, Shapiro became editor-at-large for Breitbart News, and 3 years later, he founded The Daily Wire and subsequently started his online podcast, The Ben Shapiro Show, which soon became the second most listened to iTunes podcast, exceeded only in popularity by Oprah Winfrey's podcast. Owing to his no-holds-bar, blunt talk, Shapiro has become a lightning rod for controversy, and as I mentioned earlier, protesters have tried to prevent Mr. Shapiro from speaking, and he has also become a popular target for those who do not share his viewpoint. But as you know, on this program, we invite thought leaders from the left and the right of the political spectrum without any bias. And so it is my pleasure to welcome to the program political commentator and best-selling author, Mr. Ben Shapiro. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Shapiro.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, one of the big stories this week is the Democratic victory in the Alabama special election where Doug Jones beat Roy Moore. And Democratic pundits, they wasted no time to say that this is a sign that taking the moral high ground is working. And conservatives seem to feel this is some isolated election and we don't need to worry about it. In your view, what should both parties learn from this election?
Well, I mean, I think that there are a bunch of lessons to be learned. First of all, the idea that the Democrats won because they took the moral high ground is not true. They won because this candidate had taken the moral low ground. I mean, it's not a matter of the Democrats were suddenly seen as the moral halcyons in this race. It was that the guy who they were running against was a credibly accused child molester. So that seems to take a little bit of the shine off the finish there. But when it comes to what Democrats are learning that's wrong about this, they're learning that they can continue to run radical pro-choice candidates and win even in places like Alabama. The reality is that if the Democrats had run anybody who was pro-life, then they would have won this race by 10. This wouldn't have been a two-point race. I mean, how do you only win a race by 2 points when your opponent literally was accused of molesting a 14-year-old girl credibly? It speaks to not just that Alabama is a red state, but that if you run the most left-leaning candidate you can find in somebody like Doug Jones, you make a blowout race into a pretty competitive one in Alabama for Democrats. That said, Democrats obviously do have an enthusiasm advantage. If you look at the voting in Alabama, what you see is that 93% of Hillary Clinton's vote showed up to vote for Doug Jones. Only about 48% of President Trump's vote in Alabama showed up to vote for Roy Moore. So the enthusiasm gap isn't just existent in Alabama. It was existent in Virginia. It's been existent in state races in places like Kansas and Oklahoma, in Maine, in in the state of Washington. So the Democrats are definitely sitting on what could be a wave election in 2018. But if their takeaway from this is that the American people are desperately in love with their policies, as opposed to the American people are really not particularly fond of Roy Moore and don't have a lot of enthusiasm for President Trump, at least not enough to go out and save him in the midterm, I think that they're overthinking this.
Well, it sounds like you agree with the folks that are saying this wasn't a Doug Jones win. This was a Roy Moore loss. And if that's clearly the case, why in the world did the Republicans run him?
Well, I mean, I think that this was just a comedy of errors. So first of all, there are a bunch of remember there are two rounds of primary here. First, there was the round with Mo Brooks and Roy Moore and Luther Strange. And in that primary, Mitch McConnell intervened to basically knock Mo Brooks out. So he spent a lot of money trying to downplay Mo Brooks, thinking that if he elevated Roy Moore, then Luther Strange would be able to defeat Roy Moore in the runoff. And that's, he got what he wanted in the first round, but the problem was that Roy Moore absolutely overwhelmed Luther Strange in the second round of the primary. So mistake number one was getting rid of Mo Brooks in the first round of the primaries for Republicans. Mistake number two was a bunch of people backing Roy Moore over Luther Strange in the second round of the primaries, and that would be people like Steve Bannon. After it was pretty clear that Roy Moore was going to win, they decided that it was important to jump in front of that parade, and they wanted Roy Moore as opposed to Luther Strange because Luther Strange was supposedly close to Mitch McConnell, even though Luther Strange was voting virtually 100% of the time for President Trump, and Trump backed Strange. So Moore wins the second round of the primaries. Then you get to the really serious errors, right? So now Roy Moore is the nominee. And, yeah, he's a kooky guy with a lot of weird views and a lot of extreme views. But he's still going to win. I mean, if you look at the polls, he's still up 8 to 10 points. And then the bottom falls out with these allegations of child molestation and harassing underage women. And at that point, there's no question there should be a united front to pull the plug. At that point, President Trump should have come out and said, get out. The Senate should have come out and said, get out. All of his supporters in Alabama should have come out and said, get out. Yeah, but that's not what happened. And right. Even more mysterious is at the 11th hour, Trump steps in to try to back Moore. Yeah, that was a huge mistake, I think, by President Trump, because it was pretty clear that was going to be a neck-and-neck race. He was trying to nudge Moore over the finish line, and I think he was doing so probably on the advice of Bannon, who he remains relatively close to, apparently. And because of that, the president, jumps into a race that he really has no business in, and then he drags the entire Republican National Committee into backing a guy who's a credibly accused child molester. The National Republican Senatorial Committee, led by Cory Gardner, said we're not getting involved, right? We're not interested in having Roy Moore among our number. But the RNC jumped in, Trump jumped in, and so now everybody's got a lot of egg on their face because they get the worst of all possible worlds, which is they back the accused child molester and he loses. So you don't even get the Senate seat after humiliating yourself on behalf of a guy who, has a bunch of accusers who say that he was basically trolling the food court for dates when he was in his early 30s.
So as a takeaway, what does the GOP learn from this? Do they, to me, there's only one takeaway here, and that is the candidate you run matters. It matters. You can't just run somebody and say, well, Bannon's going to back them and Trump's going to back them, and so everything will turn out. And, there's a Republican majority in Alabama. A Republican always wins, and so it doesn't matter who we put up there. It does matter.
Yeah, there is a limit to the partisan reactionary nature of politics. And there is this idea that you could basically put up, dog excrement as a candidate and that it would win because it's Alabama and you hate Democrats and Doug Jones is pro-choice, and that just doesn't fly. So you're right. Obviously, the candidate that you run matters. And not only that, there's this weird idea that's predominated in Republican politics that I think is utterly false, that Trumpism works for people aside from Trump. And when I say Trumpism, I don't mean an ideology or philosophy, because I don't think there is such a thing as Trumpism in that respect. But Trumpism is in the attitude, the anti-establishment, I can do anything, I can brazen my way through any problem attitude that President Trump has. That works in a presidential election when you're running against the least popular candidate in the history of American politics, Hillary Clinton, and it's a binary race for the White House, the most important position in America. But any other race, people are going to look at the two candidates and say, is it really worth the stain on me personally to get up and go vote for the accused child molester? Is that really a smart move?
Yeah, I agree, and I believe that these allegations had a lot to do with Republicans staying home. As you say, half the Trump voters did not show up, and therein you have the win to Doug Jones. We have to take our first break, but stay where you are. We'll be right back with more from Ben Shapiro. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Hi, I'm Joan London. If you're worried about your parent or loved one living alone, like I was, and you want reliable senior care information, then call A Place for Mom, the nation's largest senior living referral service.
Finding an apartment that was on the courtyard with the view of the trees, the view of the ducks, the stream, the creek, all of that, that was what I needed.
You'll get free information on assisted living, Alzheimer's care, nursing homes, even important financial information. Here's the number.
To speak with a local senior living advisor, call A Place for Mom at 800-451-2976. That's 800-451-2976.
A Place for Mom is a free service, and you can trust them to help you. So if you're struggling to find reliable senior living information, there's a place for answers, A Place for Mom.
To speak with a local senior living advisor, call A Place for Mom at 800-451-2976. That's 800-451-2976.
I owed the IRS $10,000.
The IRS garnished my wages.
They put a lien on my house.
The IRS is the most powerful collection agency in the world. They do not give up until you pay.
I couldn't sleep. We were being audited. I called Tax Solutions Now, and a great big weight was lifted off my shoulders.
I called Tax Solutions Now, and they got the IRS off my back.
Tax Solutions Now had my wage garnishment lifted in 48 hours.
Tax Solutions Now can get you help. Our agents know the rules, can stop the pain, and get you the best deal. We connect you with a team of former IRS agents and tax professionals who will get the IRS off your back.
We saved our home and overcame the most powerful collection agency in the world.
Call Tax Solutions now. Time is running out.
Call 800-987-0577. 800-987-0577. 800-987-0577. 800-987-0577.
Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. At 7 a.m., I shower. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m. to give Dad his medicine. At 6 a.m., I make his breakfast. At 7 a.m., I shower. I start laundry at 8. At 10, we go for a walk. Every day, I wake up at 5 a.m.
For those dealing with the daily struggles of caring for a loved one, we hear you. That's why AARP created a community with experts and other caregivers for advice, tips, and support. Together, let's help each other better care for ourselves and the ones we love. Visit aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
I am done with my mattress. That's right. I'm not spending another night on this old bag. My new mattress comes today, and this thing is out of here. Bye-bye, mattress.
Yep. Bye-bye, mattress. So says you and about 1,000 other people every day. And that's a lot of old mattresses with no place to go. There's the landfill, of course, where they just take up space. But what a waste. Because you could send it to a mattress recycler, where old mattresses get broken down into steel, foam, wood, and fiber that become new steel, carpet padding, home insulation, garden mulch, biomass fuel, locomotive oil filters, and all kinds of other great stuff. So bye-bye mattress is right. But don't toss it. Recycle it. It's easy. And it's free. To find a mattress recycler in your area, visit buybuymattress.com.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and my guest today is Ben Shapiro. And before the break, we were talking about the Republican loss in Alabama. So along those lines, there is no question that the sexual molestation allegations sunk Moore's ship in the final days. But in recent weeks, sexual harassment accusations have come forth regarding the president himself. How do you think those are being handled?
Well, I mean, I think there's a slight difference. The allegations that I've seen have not been new allegations. These are the same allegations that were trotted out in October and November of 2016. And I took them very seriously at the time. You know, for a variety of reasons, I did not support either of the candidates at the top of the ticket. I didn't actually vote at the top of the ticket. But, you know, I think the logic for a lot of people on the left was, okay, well, Now we're taking this stuff more seriously. So if we rehash these allegations, then that'll somehow change the math. I don't think that's correct. The reason I don't think that's correct is because you can break these sorts of scandals down into two categories. One is evidence breaks after somebody has already been greenlit by the American people. That would be sort of Al Franken. Nobody knew all these allegations were out there about Franken, and now he's in the Senate, and now there's new evidence, and so what do? And then there's kind of number two, which is that the allegations come out, Trump raises his way through them, and now he's been elected. So is he really going to resign? Are they really going to impeach him over stuff that everybody knew when he was elected in the first place? In order for you to make a strong case that the situation has changed such that he ought to be thrown out and the people's will ought to be overridden, you do have to make a certain case that something new has come about to change the underlying circumstances. I don't think that's true, particularly with President Trump. If there would be like a new rape allegation against Trump, I think that would change the game. But I'm not sure that more of the same is going to change the game for Trump.
Well, it's interesting you bring up a rape allegation. We had a rape allegation against President Clinton, and that didn't seem to go anywhere either. There's almost sort of a strange immunity once you get to a certain office.
People are reluctant to give up the power for sure, and I think that's clear with Trump. This is what I was saying before the break, that there is a sort of math that we all do in our heads. We don't want to admit that we all do this in our heads with politics, but we do. If it's a dog catcher race and somebody is alleged to have groped women's breasts, for example, then we will not show up to vote for that person because we'll say, hey, it's a dog catcher. Who cares? For a congressional race, we probably won't show up because, okay, it's a congressional seat. There are 435 of them. What's the big deal? If it's a senator, then we probably say, well, maybe we'll show up. Maybe we won't. When it's the president, we say, well, we have to show up. I mean, it's the most powerful man on earth or woman on earth. How could we not show up for that? How do we not make the call? So I think that as you elevate the office, people are willing to break more eggs to make the omelet.
Boy, that is so ugly, though. I'm not doubting
really
what you're
cynical.
saying, but it's just ugly. It's ugly human behavior.
It's pretty cynical, but I think
it is cynical.
It's pretty descriptive.
It's
cynical. I think it's pretty descriptive, unfortunately. The last several years in politics have taught me that no matter my level of cynicism, I'm still 3 levels not cynical enough. So.
Oh, don't say it,
change,
Ben. Don't say that. Listen, I want to switch gears for a moment and talk about the other issue that's front and center this week, which is immigration reform. And following the recent bombing in the New York subway corridor, Attorney General Sessions said that this family chain migration, along with the diversity lottery, are creating pathways for terrorists to enter the country. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact is that our immigration system is broken, obviously. That the lottery system is stupid, was stupid, will be stupid. The idea that through sheer luck we're going to let you into the country is foolishness. Any sovereign people has the ability to decide who it does and who it does not want to admit into its borders. And the legislation, really the 65 Immigration Naturalization Act that was pushed forward by Ted Kennedy, it changed the way we do immigration in the country, making it much less about what's good for America and much more about who do we think ought to deserve to get in on the basis of sympathy or on the basis of diversity, and this kind of stuff has no bearing on reality. I think it's
yeah. But let me ask you this: What's so wrong? What's so wrong about admitting people on the basis of sympathy or empathy or creating a safe harbor for people? I mean, we did that during World War II. We weren't asking people's qualifications in World War II.
Well, I mean, the truth is that we did ask people's qualifications in some pretty bad ways during World War II, actually, right? I mean, we were turning away Holocaust survivors from the East Coast. But that said, there's a difference in kind there. You do have to screen sort of which people are coming in. I mean, I'm not sure that every culture is equivalent when it comes to who you admit and who you don't. If we were to admit everyone who wants to get into the United States on the basis of sympathy, we'd have about 6 billion citizens pretty quickly.
I know, but at issue here seems to be this belief that America should be the refuge for the rich or the poor, the skilled or the unskilled, Muslim or Christian, any other religion, versus this notion that the United States needs to be particular about who it admits to the country and allow only those who can contribute to our success in. Is there some way we can merge these ideologies, or you just think you got to be on one team or the other?
Well, no, I do think you can merge the ideologies, and I do think that we do have, asylum provisions that suggest that if your life's in specific danger and we screen you and we find that you're not a threat to the United States or that you have sympathy for the United States, then we'll let you in. And I do think that, refugees from different parts of the globe are not all the same. I think that the boat people from Vietnam are not quite the same as Syrian refugees in terms of, number one, what we can screen, and number two, the ideology that they're running away from. that they've embraced personally. So, we ought to I'm not saying sympathy ought to play no part. I'm saying that sympathy ought to be combined with the idea that our sympathy can only extend as far as people who we think are going to be net benefits for the country. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think it's people who are running away are always going to be of no benefit to the country. I think precisely the opposite. Many of the people who have made America so wonderful are people who legitimately were refugees from tyrannical countries, whether you're talking the former Soviet Union or Nazi Germany.
That's exactly right. And I'm glad to hear you say this, because many times when I'm talking to people, I hear the conservative viewpoint on immigration portrayed as we only want PhDs and software programmers and engineers, in our country. And that's not what has made America great.
I mean, first of all, I'm libertarian on immigration. The only reason that I think that screening is necessary is, one, for safety, and two, for belief in a small government sort of liberty. If you're coming in non-sympathetic to traditional American ideals, I think that's a problem for the culture of the United States. But if we're not even talking about voting, if we're talking about you just want to come in here and you want to work and you're not going to be on any welfare programs, I don't care. Come on in. I mean, I'm perfectly willing to have an open immigration system.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. Is this something the GOP can realistically take on? I mean, healthcare has been a bit of a bust. They're barely able to push this tax program through. Now they're down a seat in the Senate. I mean, is immigration likely to get any Democratic support at all?
No, I think that it's very unlikely that Democrats will back anything other than a full amnesty for a group of people. And I think Trump knows that if he offers that, he's going to be in some serious trouble. That said, you may see the Republicans in Congress move with President Trump to peel away maybe one or two senators. And if they do that, then they may be in solid shape. But it's not going to be an immigration program that Trump's base likes very much. It's going to be much more along the lines of DACA and enshrining that legislatively, which is something that Trump ran against. Then it's going to be along the lines of the immigration plan he presented with Senator Cotton.
Right. I just, when Trump was first elected, I was maybe the only person on the air that was saying he's got to start with taxes. Don't start with health care. Yeah. Don't start with immigration. Start with something that you can bring the Democrats over and get some bipartisan support with. I really wish he would have started. Yeah, it would have been a smarter move, I think.
Political strategy. Yeah, I agree with that to a certain extent. Yeah.
He should listen to radio talk show hosts, I think. I think we pretty much have it right most of the time. We have to take another scheduled intermission, but stay tuned. We'll be back after these important messages from our sponsors. You're listening to the Costa Report. I'm here today with Scott Caraccioli of Caraccioli Cellars, whose Brut Cuvée is winning wine awards faster than we can name them. What is it about Caraccioli's Brut Cuvée that sets it apart from others?
I really think it comes down to both process and the fruit. We're in an ideal location to grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and being able to harvest that at optimal pick points in Monterey County, where you have a climate and soils that produce these grapes in the best way possible. Pulling them earlier on, you still get a lot of fruit expression, but you get a lot of acidity, which gives you the opportunity to make killer sparkling wine. And our Brut, being our flagship wine, has everything that's possible when it comes to sparkling wine. You can order any of our products directly from us by visiting our website at caracciolicellars.com or calling the tasting room directly, 831-622-7722.
I'm Paul George of the Indiana Pacers. When I was 6, I had one thing on my mind. When I was 6, my days were spent playing basketball every chance I could. When I was 6, my dream was to make it to the NBA. When I was 6, my mom had a stroke. So I want you to learn the signs of a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. Because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. I'm Paul George. Protect the ones you love. Spot a stroke F-A-S-T. Fast. Life is why. Visit strokeassociation.org. Brought to you by the American Stroke Association in the Ad Council.
Women now make up 37% of the workforce, changing their role forever.
Harvard Medical School has now opened its doors to new female applicants.
The first woman is now in space.
The majority of last year's doctorate degrees were earned by women.
We've come so far, but our news is changing for the worse. More women die from heart disease and stroke than men, even though it can be prevented. Make a change at GoRedForWomen.org today. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the American Heart Association's Go Red for Women.
Okay, what are you wearing right now?
Nothing.
That's right. So Mommy's going to teach you how to dress yourself. Underwear always comes first, name tag at the back, then pants, then shirt. Get the first button in the right hole or you have to start all over. Socks going first, then shoes, right on right, left on left. With shoelaces, just take the ends, cross them over, switch the loops, the rabbit goes down the hole, pull tight, and you're left with bunny ears. Got it? Why are your pants on your head?
Most parenting is hard to do in just 2 minutes. But 2 minutes twice a day making sure they brush their teeth is easier, and it could help save them from a lifetime of tooth pain. Visit 2min2x.org to find out more. A message from the Partnership for Healthy Mouths, Healthy Lives, and the Ad Council.
Yeah, it's me, your heart. Listen to me. We've got to talk. High blood pressure is serious, and yours? Whoa. What happened to us? We used to be so much more active. But lately, you've been ignoring me. I know you think I'm just going to keep ticking away forever, but you're wrong. You can do so much more to control your high blood pressure. Doing the minimum isn't doing enough. I'm under a lot of pressure and can quit whenever I want. Bet you didn't know that. But I like my job. Just treat me better. Check on me. Give me something green to nibble on every once in a while. And maybe we can do some exercise on occasion. Let's get to it. After all, we're in this together.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you. High blood pressure can lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get your blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late. Find out how at heart.org/blood pressure. Check, change, control. A message from the American Heart Association, the American Stroke Association, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, my guest today is the host of one of the most popular podcasts on iTunes, best-selling author Ben Shapiro. Now, moving from domestic issues to foreign policy, the president recently acknowledged Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which seemed to send a message that the U.S. No longer maintains a neutral position when it comes to the peace process in the Middle East. From a strategic standpoint, I'm trying to understand what the upside of this executive order was. Can you tell me what was gained by this?
Sure. So I think that the upside of the executive order is that there are a couple upsides. One is that no negotiation that takes as a precondition that Israel is going to hand over Jerusalem to the Palestinians is ever going to be successful. So this myth that's been pervaded by the European countries and by democratic administrations before, that Israel is going to start from a position of handing over parts of East Jerusalem, including the Western Wall, to the Muslim community, is just absurd. It's not going to happen.
It takes it off the negotiation table.
Right. Let's start from the point of reality, and the point of reality is that that's not happening. So once the United States recognizing that is worthwhile, because otherwise the United States is beating its head against a wall, right? We're trying to push Israel into doing something that Israel clearly is not going to do. So that's number one. Number two, there's something that's very interesting that's been happening in the Middle East, really as a bizarre after effect of President Obama's terrible policies there, and that is that there's been this alliance that's been formed in the Middle East that's been Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and Israel against the rising Iranian power that President Obama has essentially supported. And that alliance is now stronger than any interest that those countries have in the Palestinian issue. So never has there been less controversy over Israel basically recognizing that this is their capital and America recognizing that this is the capital. There's been very little violence. The so-called rising up of the Arab Street has not happened. There has been, I believe, one death so far of a Palestinian. So everyone was saying this is going to set the Middle East on fire. It hasn't. No one cares. And the reason no one cares is because the Americans basically said to this alliance, okay, guys, if you're going to work together, you're going to have to work together on the basis of common interests and recognize each other's existence and recognize that Jerusalem is Jewish territory. And then, you'll actually have a relationship going forward. So I think it's actually beneficial in the same way that I think that George H.W. Bush should have said to the Arab alliance against Saddam Hussein that if Israel wants to fight on your side, well, they're sure allowed to, deal with it. That I think that would have overcome a lot of barriers. I think that it's a mistake for the United States not to push for common ground between Israel and other Arab countries, Muslim countries in the region, and do so on the basis of not only shared values, but shared realities.
But this is very different from how we've negotiated in the past. In the past, we've pretty much said, well, everything's negotiable. And I think the point that you're making is, well, everything wasn't negotiable because there were certain things that the Israelis were not going to do. So why pretend?
Right. And then when we played honest broker, we were actually not being an honest broker. Right. If you were an arbitrator and let's say you were arbitrating a divorce. Well, there's certain things that you know the dog is going to end up with the husband, the cat's going to end up with the wife. And you just know this going in. If you started off the negotiations by saying, well, the dog's on the table and the cat's on the table, nothing's ever going to get done. Both sides are just going to walk away from the table on a routine basis. The fact is that the United States trying to push Israel to give up what is the heart of not only Israel, but of Judaism is patently insane. And it's not actually being an honest broker. It's actually pushing Israel to give up things that it is not willing to give up. And it's pushing the Palestinians to the idea that if they act with enough terror, they're going to force the United States to force Israel into concessions. Because let's be real about this. All of these supposedly glorious negotiations that have taken place since Oslo have been a complete failure. Oslo was a complete failure. I mean, nothing good has happened here. You've seen the creation of a full-on terrorist state in the Middle East. The Gaza Strip has become the eminent preserve of Hamas, which is an actual State Department registered terrorist group. And the Palestinian Authority is a terrorist group, and Islamic Jihad is a terrorist group. And the United States is playing honest broker between a terrorist group and our only real democratic ally in the Middle East. I don't understand, first of all, why there should be any honest broker between those two sides. I wouldn't take an honest broker between Charles Manson and his victims. It doesn't seem like a particularly useful process to me.
Well, I don't know if I could describe it in those terms, but let me tell you what bothers me. It's not even the fact that we finally came clean with what has to be and took this off the negotiation table, because I happen to think that the negotiations go much better if you just take the things that are deal breakers off the table altogether. What bothers me is the use of executive orders. Trump's been using a lot of them, but hey, let's be honest. Obama, Bush, when they can't seem to get something, anything done, they revert to executive orders, which, just so the public understands, means when the next president comes in, he could reverse that executive order. That's the danger. This was the problem I had with the Iran treaty. I felt that roast, and I've talked to Alan Dershowitz and any number of constitutional lawyers, and I said, that was a treaty. It should have gone through Congress. That didn't belong in the executive branch. And they agree. But look what happens. Then the next administration comes in and says, all deals are off. So this is the problem with executive orders, is they can be reversed. And it could really create such havoc in our foreign policy to have these things be done in terms of executive orders and then reversed by the next administration if they don't like it.
But this one's kind of unique. This one's kind of unique. And the reason this is kind of unique is because the Iran deal actually was something that needed to go through Congress. As you said, it required 2/3 approval from the Senate. The Senate basically waived its own power because they're
did that bother you?
But it was ridiculous. I mean, Bob Corker leading the charge to basically make it so that 2/3 of the Senate had to turn down Obama's Iran deal, as opposed to 2/3 of the Senate ratifying the Iran deal. It's a reversal of constitutional law and an abdication of duty on the part of Congress. This is actually the reverse. Number one, it's exclusively in the domain of foreign policy and doesn't require a treaty. So this one, actually, the president does have the power to do constitutionally. Number two, even if you believe the president doesn't have the power to do it constitutionally, this has been congressional policy for more than 20 years, right? In 1995, Congress passed by an overwhelming majority a bill that said that the embassy should be moved to Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem was the undivided capital of the state of Israel. And that was recently ratified again in just last June. It was ratified 90-0 in the Senate. So all the Democrats who are complaining about this and saying, well, how dare Trump do this? He's just doing exactly what Chuck Schumer voted for 6 months ago. So everybody who's making a big fuss over this, I find it very interesting that, all these political propagandists like Cory Booker who go out there and say, I'm super pro-Israel. Look, I just voted for this great resolution in the Senate. The minute that Trump actually makes that resolution materialize, he runs for the hills and says how terrible it is that Trump actually fulfilled his word to fulfill what Congress's word was.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I just worry about executive orders. It feels to me in the past 3 or 4 presidential administrations, I'm a little bit older than you are, I just haven't seen the overreach of the executive office like I see it now. And it's a little bit troubling. As a constitutional scholar, it bothers me.
Well, I totally agree that the overuse of executive orders is troubling, but the problem is not really the use of executive orders so much as the scope of them, right? The whole point of an executive order is it's supposed to effectuate enabling legislation. And
but
so
it feels like they're, when you can't get stuff through Congress and you just, when the relationship with Congress is broken, this is not the way to fix it.
So I totally agree with that. But this actually got through Congress, and presidents have been not fulfilling their duty by Congress. And then if they say, well, it's in our exclusive domain, then Trump has every power to do it. So one or the other has to be true. Either this is on Congress, in which case Congress already passed it, or it's on the president, in which case Trump can do what he wants on it. So either way, this is not really as much of a constitutional issue as, for example, President Obama just unilaterally deciding not to enforce immigration law. Like that was an actual executive order that has nothing to do with the Constitution, and that's why courts actually enjoined its use.
Yeah, I understand that. So what you're saying is this could not be reversed easily by a new administration.
Well, they could try, but it could in the sense that, again, the president has plenary power over foreign policy. The president could theoretically decide, I'm going to move the embassy back out of Jerusalem, which would be a nightmare. But I think that once the ground has shifted, once the bluff has been called, let's put it this way, every president since Bill Clinton has said that the capital of Israel is Jerusalem, and then they just neglected conveniently to move the embassy there. If Trump actually does it, it's going to be very difficult for any president to reverse himself on that, particularly because the American people are very much in favor of the embassy being in Jerusalem. The American people, by and large, sympathize with the Israelis over the Palestinians, and the vast majority of Americans believe that the capital of Israel is Jerusalem.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, having worked in Washington for a long time, I have to say a lot of people are not aware how critical the Israelis have been in our own national security here at home. We have so many joint ventures technologically and defense-wise with them that they are absolutely critical to our own safety here. We have to take our final break, but stay with us. You're listening to the Costa Report.
Are you struggling with addiction or alcohol problems? If you're depressed, drinking, and using drugs, you may need help. And the Affordable Care Act guarantees coverage of substance abuse.
I knew I could get myself out of this. I just needed some hope and some help.
I took the first step to recovery when I made the call.
Call the Addiction, Hope, and Helpline now for a free assessment with someone who cares. Call 800-962-6969. 800-962-6969.
I feel like I'm losing control. I'm afraid I'll lose my job or even my family.
Call now for hope and help with proven, gentle recovery programs.
I never thought that I could be somebody who didn't drink and use drugs.
I'm in recovery, getting the help I need.
Call the Addiction, Hope, and Helpline now for a free assessment with someone who cares. Call 800-962-6969. 800-962-6969. 800-962-6969.
Have you racked up more than $10,000 in credit card debt? Are you barely getting by, making minimum payments? You should know the credit card companies are tricking you into thinking there's no way out. Credit card companies would rather you didn't know that there are ways you can become debt-free and you don't have to pay the entire amount you owe. There are debt relief programs that help people like you escape overwhelming credit card debt. National Debt Relief has helped tens of thousands of people just like you reduce more than $500 million of debt. National Debt Relief has helped so many people they're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. You don't have to declare bankruptcy or take out a consolidation loan. You have the right to settle your debt for a mere fraction of what you owe. Reduce a large portion of your debt now. Call National Debt Relief at 800-314-7417. 800-314-7417. That's 800-314-7417.
It may be hard to believe, but people just like you are already saving money. FeedThePig.org makes it easy. Their simple savings plan teaches you how to start saving without going overboard. So you don't need to mooch off your friends.
You gonna finish that grape?
You mean the one in my mouth? You don't need to stop buying the necessities.
What you're smelling is a natural musk.
Ew.
You don't need to be a medical test subject.
How do you feel?
Mostly okay. Sometimes, though.
You don't need to get a second job as a stuntman. You just need an internet connection. Don't get left behind. Start your personal savings plan with the tips and tools on feedthepig.org. That way, you don't need to sell your soul to the devil.
$15 is the best I can do.
All right, deal. Brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Hey, America. We need to have a little talk. I don't know if you've noticed, but we got a lot of food in this country. A lot of peaches, a lot of corn, a lot of apples, a lot of everything. We've got so much food that we can't even eat it all. So if we got all this extra food, how are 17 million kids in America struggling with hunger? I just don't get it. That's why the Feeding America nationwide network of food banks gathers surplus food and gets it to the hungry kids who need it. They can get you food even if you live in Idaho or Alaska or somewhere crazy like that. This isn't complicated. We got extra food and we've got hungry kids. Feeding America's done the math. Now it's your turn. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org. I know you got internet on your phone, so what are you waiting for? We can't do it without your help. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Costa Report. I'm Rebecca Costa, and if you're just joining us, our guest today is Ben Shapiro. And before the break, we were talking about the fact that every modern-day president has promised to move the U.S. Embassy to Israel's capital, Jerusalem. And so it really shouldn't have come as such a surprise that Trump decided to act on it. This was approved by Congress. It's been supported by congressional leaders. I just when it came as such a shock and news, I was a little bit surprised that we were surprised. I want to ask you about what you feel, because, clearly you are a voice for conservatives and libertarians, by the way. I want to ask you about what you feel can be done to reverse the polarization that we're experiencing right along party lines, and how we might be able to get some bipartisan cooperation, because this idea that each party is going to move forward without the other isn't really in the spirit of a democracy, and it's not really working for the American people. So what are your ideas on what could happen to court some Democrats?
So, I think that the first thing that's going to have to happen is that people need to just generally get beyond the idea that the personalities matter more than the party. And I think that the one thing that's going to have to happen is that both sides are going to have to stop attributing terrible motivations to the other. And that's something that's going to have to happen broadly. One of the things that's happened is that the collapse of our civic culture, our civic norms, the idea that we actually have a social fabric that we have to preserve, that we like each other, that we're neighbors, right? All of these things have sort of disappeared. And to fill that gap, we've filled it with, well, those guys are wrong and I hate them. And it's going to be very difficult for us to find common ground, even on things where we agree. This is what's so weird about the last election cycle. If you looked at President Trump and how he was campaigning versus Hillary Clinton, on a wide variety of issues, they were closer to each other than a Republican and Democrat have been in a presidential election in quite some time, right? But President Trump had said things about nationalizing health care. President Trump had talked about spending $1 trillion on infrastructure projects. He had talked about taxing the rich. And yet the polarization in the country was incredibly, incredibly wide. And that was because I think we've filled our, the gap in our social fabric with anger at one another. We're trying to find group identity in opposition to other Americans, as opposed to find group identity in ideas that we think are valuable. If we found group identity in ideas we think are valuable, we might be able to find some common space. So, I don't know if now's the time for that to happen. I don't know if people are ready to have that happen, or if we're just having too much fun clubbing each other over the head with chairs, WWE style. But if it doesn't happen, then we're going to continue to go down this path.
But let's face it, opposing everything is the same as, it's the definition of gridlock.
Right, and I think that, but what I'm saying is that people say that you're opposing everything because you just want nothing to happen. I don't think that's right. You're opposing everything because you think the other guy is a bad human. And you see this with regard to Trump. You have people who are saying that Trump is the worst president in the history of the Republic.
Bad humans have good ideas. Sometimes they do.
Number one,
sometimes they're right.
Sometimes, number one, that's true. But number two, I'm not sure that everybody who disagrees with me is a bad human, right? We might just have bad ideas, or we might disagree on certain things and agree on other things. But the common ground for the country has sort of fallen away. I don't even think that most Americans look at their neighbors and say, you're a good human being, at least when it comes to politics. It's much more fun to suggest, if you're on the right, that everybody on the left is an insane socialist who wants the USSR to win, And it's more fun on the left to suggest that everybody on the right is a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe who's a terrible person. And we're having fun with this. I mean, this is why we're now in the era of political entertainment. Look, the President of the United States is a reality TV star. We watch our politics like we watch our entertainment. And we found the last election cycle entertaining. The problem is that is not actually how you're going to get policy done or how you're going to bring people together. I do think at a certain point Americans are going to tire of this. I don't think, by the way, it started with Trump. I think this started really with President Obama, who's more of a cultural figure even than a political figure. But we're going to need to separate out the idea that politics and entertainment are the same.
I think you're right about that. It's a sad state of affairs, but, we kind of went through our sitcom era. Maybe we're going through our reality TV era, and we'll punch through it. I talked to a lot of old-timers like George Mitchell and George Shultz, Walter Mondale, and I asked them about it, and they say, well, one of the big problems is that during their day, when you got elected, you moved your whole family to Washington, D.C., and you kept running into each other at school plays and neighborhood barbecues. And, there was a social fabric there in Washington, D.C., but nobody moves there anymore. And he said, so you don't run into each other. Your kids don't go to school together, and that those friendships have sort of deteriorated. And I think that gives credence to some of the things that you've been talking about.
I think there's truth to that, but I think that just on a more general level, Americans on the grassroots base level don't have as much in common with their neighbors as they thought they did. Like a person from Alabama feels utterly alienated from a person from California and vice versa. I mean, you actually have states boycotting each other now, right? It's that if you disagree on same-sex marriage, you don't disagree on same-sex marriage because you think the institution of marriage is worth preserving. It's because you hate gay people, right? That's the sort of culture that's put out by Hollywood. And so people in Alabama say, okay, if you're from Hollywood, you're probably a jerk who hates me. And if you're from Hollywood, you say, well, you're from Alabama, you're probably a redneck.
But not all policy, as you point out, the policy isn't really personal.
But everything has become personal now because people have decided that their identity is political, and this is the biggest thing. I think that we used to find our identity in our family relationships, in our community, in our religion, in a wide variety of other areas. But politics has become so overwhelming for people that now you find your value as a human being in opposing or supporting certain politicians. And this is why people are taking pictures of themselves voting for President Obama in the voting booth. This is why people virtue signal in how they vote. They're not just voting as a means to an end. They're not just voting because they're saying, I want these guys to go take care of business and leave me alone. They're voting because they are saying that my vote says something about me as a human being and your vote says something about you as a human being. So if you voted for Roy Moore in Alabama, you must have voted for Roy Moore in Alabama not because you thought that he'd be better on policy and you were ignoring all of his bad qualities. You voted for him because you are fine with child molestation, and in fact, you like child molestation. Right?
Wow.
This is the ultimate outcome, and I think
that
once you get to that level of derisive thought about your fellow American, it's very difficult to come back from that.
It is, but I've got confidence that the fact that you and I are speaking today, we agree on some things, we disagree on other things, but we can be civil, we can listen to each other, and we can ask each other questions in a kind and compassionate way. I just want more models like this conversation to take place in the media. People don't have to agree, but I do believe that we can be civil and we can appeal to the higher instruments of our genetic inheritance. Not the lower instincts of just bantering back and forth. I think this was a great conversation today. And I before we run out of time, I do want to thank you for your insights. Thank you for your podcast and for making time to be with us today. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Be well.
Now, before we run out of time today, I want to tell you about a simple way that you can give 2 gifts by purchasing one. If you're a regular listener of this program, then you know that my new book titled On the Verge hit Amazon and bookstores everywhere with a bang 60 days ago. The book is chock full of concrete tactics both individuals and organizations can use to quickly and successfully adapt to change. And we all know that change is now moving at the speed of Twitter. And no matter who you are, whether you're an executive or a worker bee like me, you're struggling to keep up. On the Verge is the first book to show how to keep up and even get out ahead of change. And I want you to have a copy of this book because I wrote it for you. But there's a second reason that I want you to get a copy for yourself and to think about ordering gift copies for your friends, colleagues, and loved ones. And that's because 100% of the proceeds of the book go toward funding my work and also the outreach like this program. Not 95 or 99%, 100% of every dollar earned from the sale of On the Verge goes toward funding the staff here at the Costa Group and making it possible for me to make public appearances across the country, publish a biweekly column on Newsmax, consult with our nation's leaders, and publish books that look at our problems from a scientific, logical, and politically neutral perspective. And you know how valuable and how needed that is today. With every copy of On the Verge you purchase, you let us know that you support our work. And that's what I mean when I say that purchasing gift copies of On the Verge is an opportunity to give 2 gifts when you purchase one. In addition to a best-selling book, you also help to keep our work moving forward. On behalf of all of the staff at the Costa Group, we thank you for that support, and we wish you and your loved ones a safe and joyous holiday season. And that pretty much wraps up our first hour. Next week, I'll be taking a short hiatus to join the holidays with my family, and we'll be rebroadcasting one of our best of 2017 interviews with Peter Georgescu on the real forces behind income inequality. Don't miss Peter Georgescu next week, right here on the only news program that puts policy ahead of politics. Now stay tuned for a second hour of the Costa Report. Listen up, because I want to let you in on a little secret. You don't have to be a psychic to know which business and political experts are going to be on the Costa Report next month. All you have to do is sign up for our free monthly newsletter at RebeccaCosta.com. It takes less than a minute, and when you do, you'll receive our guest schedule along with special announcements and free offers the first of every month. So go to RebeccaCosta.com and sign up today.
Yesterday, I got a call from the IRS. They say I owe them over $16,000. I don't have that kind of money.
Don't try to fight the IRS on your own. Use Coast One Financial Group and let them help you get a fresh start. If you owe at least $10,000 in back taxes, call now for a free and confidential tax debt analysis. Call Coast One now for a free consultation at 800-643-4661 now. 800-643-4661. That's 800-643-4661.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. I improved my credit score.
You're kidding, right?
No.
How are we supposed to be the bad boys of electro-synth pop if you're out there being responsible? The band is about to be discovered. This is our year.
Yeah, you've been saying that for a while now.
You think anyone in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was worried about their credit score?
I never really thought that.
Of course they weren't. Rock stars aren't supposed to think about that kind of stuff. We're supposed to think about how many guitars we've smashed, write aggressively sensitive power ballads, start questionable fashion trends, tragically break up and blame creative differences.
All right. I thought maybe it was time to take control of my finances, you know? Start using a budget. Get out of debt. Set some goals.
A budget? Debt? Set some goals? Listen, I knew that we'd have our creative differences, but I was hoping they'd involve a little more scandal.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
The Costa Report is now heard in all 50 states on fine radio stations, including this one.